I spent 45 years cutting open human hearts to save lives. Steady hands. No panic. So when my son-in-law shattered a bottle of whiskey across my face on New Year's Eve and my own daughter screamed, "Pathetic old fool," I did what any surgeon would do. I assessed the damage, controlled the bleeding, and planned my next incision. Except this time, the patient was my entire family. And the tumor was him. I'm truly grateful you're here with me today. Before we go any further, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. And my dear viewers, can I ask you something personal? How old are you this year? I really want to know who's walking this journey with me. Also, a quick note. This story includes some fictional elements woven in for reflection and storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real names or places is purely coincidental, but the message I'm sharing with you is very real. But let me take you back to the beginning. To understand how a bottle of whiskey ended up embedded in my skull, you need to understand the dinner that came before it. And to understand the dinner, you need to understand the house. My house. The one I built with my own hands and Helen's stubborn faith that a heart surgeon could learn to swing a hammer. It was New Year's Eve, 2024. 7 in the evening. My dining room smelled like slow-roasted prime rib and rosemary potatoes. The kind of warmth that seeps into the walls and makes a house feel like something more than wood and plaster. I had spent 3 hours in the kitchen, following Helen's handwritten recipe cards, the ones she kept in a tin box above the stove. Her handwriting was small and precise, just like her. Roast at 325 for 4 hours. Baste every 45 minutes. Don't forget the garlic, Walt. You always forget the garlic. I didn't forget the garlic. The table was set with Helen's good china. The white plates with the pale blue rim that she bought at an estate sale in Hendersonville the year we got married, 43 years ago. I placed candles in the center, lit them one by one, and stood back to look at the room. The oak table seated 8. Tonight, only 6 chairs would be filled. One of them should have been Helen's. She passed 2.5 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. The cruelest irony of my life was that I spent 45 years repairing hearts, and the woman I loved most died from something I couldn't cut out. After she was gone, I stopped operating, retired at 68, moved through this house like a ghost in my own hallways, touching things she had touched, sitting in chairs she had sat in, waiting for a sound that would never come again. Our daughter Natalie and I grew apart after the funeral. That was my fault. I buried myself in designing a memorial garden for Helen instead of being present for my living daughter. By the time I looked up from the blueprints, Natalie had stopped calling. Then she met Ryan. And suddenly, she was calling again. But only to tell me she was bringing him home. That was 15 months ago. They never left. The doorbell rang at 7:15. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and walked to the front door. Through the glass, I could see Natalie standing on the porch, one hand resting on her belly. 7 months along. She wore a gray cardigan that had belonged to Helen, stretched tight across her middle. Her face was pale, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled into a loose ponytail. She looked nothing like the girl who used to dance through this house on Christmas morning, spinning until she was dizzy, laughing until she couldn't breathe. "Hi, Dad," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. I hugged her carefully, one arm around her shoulder, mindful of the baby. "Natalie, you look beautiful." She didn't smile. Ryan came in behind her, 34 years old, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly utilities. Italian leather shoes. A silver watch I didn't recognize. For a man who claimed he was building a medical device business from my guest room, he dressed like he'd already sold the company. He extended his hand with the ease of someone closing a real estate deal. "Walt, Happy New Year." I shook it. His grip was soft. No calluses. No strength. In surgery, I learned everything I needed to know about a person from their hands. Ryan's hands told me he hadn't worked a day in 15 months. Ryan, glad you could make it. Behind him came Craig and Diane Mercer, Ryan's parents. Craig was 63, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes. The smile of a man who wanted something and had learned exactly how to ask for it without asking. He clapped me on the shoulder like we were old fraternity brothers. Walt, what a beautiful home. Really stunning. Craftsman style, right? Original woodwork? 1922, I said. I restored it myself over 12 years. Incredible. His eyes moved past me, scanning the foyer, the staircase, the crown molding. Square footage? 3,800. Diane Mercer stood just inside the threshold, clutching her handbag with both hands. 58. Thin-lipped, with sharp eyes that inventoried everything they landed on. She looked at my bookshelf, my grandfather clock, the framed photograph of Helen and me on our wedding day. Then her gaze drifted to the far wall of the living room, where my collection sat behind glass. Antique surgical instruments, some dating back to the 1800s. Scalpels, forceps, bone saws, retractors, all mounted on mahogany display boards. Helen had given me the first piece, a Civil War amputation kit, for our 40th anniversary. The complete collection was worth over $600,000. Diane stared at it for a long moment. "How lovely," she said. But her eyes didn't say lovely. They said price tag. "Dinner's ready," I said. "Let's eat." We settled around the table by 7:30. I carved the prime rib, medium rare, exactly the way Helen used to make it. Craig ate like a man who hadn't seen a home-cooked meal in weeks. Diane complimented the silverware, the chandelier, the charming vintage wallpaper. Ryan picked at his plate, checking his phone every few minutes beneath the table, his thumb scrolling through something he didn't want anyone to see. Natalie sat beside him. Quiet. Too quiet. Her hand rested on her belly, a habit she'd developed whenever tension crept into the room. I noticed she did it more often these days. I watched them all from the head of the table. 45 years of surgery teaches you to read a room the way you read a patient. Elevated heart rate. Shallow breathing. Micro-expressions that betray what words try to hide. Craig's smile was a mask. Diane's compliments were reconnaissance. Ryan's silence was a wall. And my daughter, my Natalie, sat in the middle of it all, with her hand on her unborn child, looking like a woman who had forgotten what safety felt like. I set down my fork and knife. The sound was small, but it cut through the table noise like a scalpel through tissue. "Ryan," I said. "I wanted to ask, how's the medical device business coming along?" The table went quiet. Ryan looked up from his plate slowly. His jaw tightened, the way it always did when money came up, or accountability, or anything that required him to produce something other than excuses. "It's coming along," he said. His voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of a man who had rehearsed this answer in the mirror. "I've got a contract in negotiations right now. Major distributor out of Charlotte. Cardiac stents, catheter kits. The whole line." I picked up my wineglass and took a slow sip. 45 years in cardiothoracic surgery. 12,000 procedures. I had held more stents in my fingers than most people held pencils. "Which manufacturer?" I asked. Ryan hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. Most people wouldn't have caught it. But I had spent my career watching vital signs. A half-second pause before an answer was the verbal equivalent of a dropped blood pressure reading. Something was wrong. "Medivance," he said. I nodded. "And what's the catheter gauge they're distributing?" 5 French? 6? Another pause. Longer this time. His eyes shifted left. "Standard gauge. Industry standard. There's no such thing as a standard gauge catheter, Ryan. They range from 3 French to 12, depending on the application. A cardiac catheter is typically 6. A peripheral line is usually 5. If you're negotiating a distribution contract, you'd know that. The table was silent. Craig's fork had stopped halfway to his mouth. Diane's fingers tightened around her wine glass. Natalie stared at her plate. Ryan leaned back in his chair. I'm not the technical guy, Walt. I handle the business side. I don't need to know catheter sizes to close a deal. You're selling medical devices, and you don't know what a catheter gauge is. I know enough. You know nothing. I didn't raise my voice. I never do. 45 years of surgery teaches you that the quieter you speak, the harder people listen. You've been living in my house for 15 months. Rent-free. You told me you were building a medical device company. I gave you space, time, and the benefit of the doubt. 15 months, Ryan, and you can't tell me the difference between a stent and a catheter. Craig set down his fork with a deliberate clink. Walt, let's not ruin the evening. Ryan's a smart young man. The medical device industry is complex. He's learning. He's 34 years old, I said, turning to Craig. He has a pregnant wife. He hasn't contributed $1 to this household since he moved in. Learning isn't a career plan. It's an excuse. Diane's voice cut in, sharp as a scalpel. Philip was a surgeon, not a businessman. Perhaps he doesn't understand how the real world works outside an operating room. My name is Walter, I said quietly, and I understand perfectly well how the real world works. I worked in it for 45 years, while your son apparently played in it. Ryan's chair scraped against the hardwood floor. He stood up, palms flat on the table, leaning forward. You know what your problem is, Walt? You think because you cut people open for a living, you're better than everyone else. You sit in this big house with your dead wife's china and your antique knife collection, and you judge people. You've been judging me since the day I walked through that door. I've been waiting for you to prove me wrong, I said. You haven't. Natalie slammed both hands on the table. The silverware rattled. The candles flickered. Stop it. Her voice cracked. Tears glistened in her eyes. Both of you. Just stop. Natalie, I began. No, Dad. She was crying now, openly, her hand pressed to her belly. You sit here in your perfect house with your perfect memories, and you look down on us. Ryan lost his contracts because the market collapsed. It's not his fault. And you don't care about me. You never did. Not after Mom died. You just disappeared into your garden project and your surgical instruments, and you left me completely alone. The words landed like a fist to the sternum. Not because they were cruel, because some of them were true. After Helen died, I didn't know how to be a father without being a husband first. I had failed Natalie in ways I was still learning to name, but I wasn't failing her now. Not by asking the man she married to be accountable. Natalie, I said. My voice was steady. Sit down. Please. Let's talk about this. Ryan put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. It's okay, babe. Let's just go. Your dad's made himself clear. I'm not asking you to leave, I said, looking Ryan in the eye. I'm asking you to step up. He stared at me. Something shifted behind his eyes. Something cold and calculated that I had never seen before. Or maybe I had seen it and refused to acknowledge it. Then he reached for the whiskey bottle. It sat in the center of the table, 20 years old. Balvenie Doublewood. Helen had given it to me on my 50th birthday, with a note that read, "Save this for a night, worth remembering." I had saved it for 20 years, waiting for the right occasion. Tonight was supposed to be that night. A family dinner. A new year. A fresh start. Ryan picked it up by the neck. For a moment, I thought he was going to pour himself a drink. His grip tightened, his knuckles went white, and then, in one motion, he swung. I watched the bottle arc through the air. Time did what it always does in moments of violence. It slowed down. The amber liquid caught the candlelight, spiraling outward in a golden ribbon. The glass connected with the left side of my forehead, just above my eyebrow. The impact was sharp, immediate, bright. The bottle didn't shatter on contact. It cracked first, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across the glass, and then it exploded. Shards flew outward. Whiskey splashed across my face, burning my eyes. Something warm and thick began running down my temple, past my cheekbone, along my jaw, dripping onto my white collar. Blood. My blood. The room went silent. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. Natalie gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Dad. Craig stood halfway out of his chair. Walt. Are you? Diane didn't move. She just watched. Ryan stepped back. His face had gone pale. The broken neck of the bottle was still in his hand. I didn't. I lost my grip. I didn't move. Didn't wipe the blood away. I stood at the head of my dining table, blood running down my face, dripping onto Helen's good china, and I looked at every single one of them. I wanted them to see exactly what they had done, what they had allowed, what they had caused. Natalie started sobbing. Dad, I'm so sorry. Please, let me get a towel. Ryan set the broken bottle neck on the table with shaking hands. It was an accident, Walt. I swear. I lost control. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone. Blood dripped onto the screen as I typed. 3 messages, short, precise. The way I wrote surgical notes. To Catherine Blackwell, my attorney. 2 words. Time to operate. To Leo Marsh, my investigator. 4 words. I need a full diagnostic. To Dr. Samuel Park, my former colleague at the hospital. 3 words. Coming in now. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and pushed my chair away from the table. Dad. Natalie reached for my arm. Please. You're bleeding. Let me help. I pulled away gently. I need to go. Go where? To the hospital. Ryan stepped forward, hands raised. Walt. I'm so sorry. Let me drive you. Please. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The expensive suit. The Italian shoes. The soft handshake. The 15 months of empty promises and phantom contracts. He had been living in my house, eating my food, sleeping under my roof. And now he wanted to drive me to the emergency room like a concerned family member. No, I said. I walked past Craig, who blocked the hallway with his broad shoulders. Walt, be reasonable. You shouldn't drive in your condition. Move, I said quietly. Something in my voice made him step aside. I walked past Diane, who clutched her handbag like a shield. Past Ryan, whose face had shifted from pale to panicked. Past Natalie, who stood in the dining room doorway, tears streaming, one hand on her belly, the other reaching toward me. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the front door. Helen's old hook. The brass one shaped like a dogwood branch that she had found at a flea market in Black Mountain. Dad, Natalie called after me. Where are you going? I didn't answer. I opened the door and stepped out into the cold December night. The air hit my wound like rubbing alcohol. Sharp. Clarifying. I pressed a kitchen towel against my temple and walked to my car. The engine turned over on the first try. I pulled out of the driveway, one hand on the wheel, the other holding the towel against my head. In the rearview mirror, I could see my house growing smaller, every light still burning, shadows moving behind the windows. They had no idea what was coming. The drive to the hospital took 17 minutes. The heater blew warm air against my face, but I barely felt it. Blood had soaked through the towel and was dripping onto my shoulder. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I saw the dark line running from my eyebrow to my jaw. The cut was deep. I could feel the edges of skin separating with each pulse. A surgeon's hands don't shake. Not during a ruptured aorta. Not during a double bypass on a 90-year-old. Not even when the blood running down your face is your own. My hands were steady on the wheel. My mind was already 3 steps ahead. Emergency room, documentation, photographs, legal protection. Then, the real work would begin. I pulled into the hospital parking lot at 11:28. The emergency entrance glowed white and fluorescent against the dark mountain sky. Fireworks crackled somewhere in the distance. Asheville was counting down to a new year. Families were laughing, hugging, kissing at midnight. I sat in my car for 30 seconds, watching the blood drip from my chin onto my white shirt. 20 years of whiskey. 15 months of lies. One swing. Helen used to say that every surgery begins with a single incision. You don't fix the whole heart at once. You open it first. You look inside. You find what's broken. Then you cut it out. I opened the car door and walked toward the light. The emergency room at Mission Hospital was quiet for New Year's Eve. I expected chaos. Instead, the waiting area held only a teenager with a wrapped wrist and an elderly woman asleep in a wheelchair. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that flat, sterile glow I had spent most of my career working under. I walked up to the intake desk. The nurse looked up from her computer. Her eyes went straight to my forehead, then to the blood-soaked towel, then to the dark stain spreading across my white collar. "Sir, are you? I need to see a doctor," I said. "And I need photographs taken. Clear photographs, multiple angles, time-stamped, before any treatment begins." She blinked. "Sir, legal documentation. This is an assault case. I need photographic evidence before the wound is cleaned." She stared at me for a moment, then picked up the phone. "Let me get you into a room." They put me in exam room 4. I kept the towel pressed against the wound and waited. Blood had dried along my jawline, pulling the skin tight when I moved my mouth. The cut throbbed with each heartbeat. Pulse, pulse, pulse. 72 beats per minute. Elevated, but controlled. The door opened and a familiar face walked in. Dr. Samuel Park. Mid-50s, Korean-American, steady hands. We had worked together for over 20 years. He assisted on dozens of my cardiac procedures. The last time I saw him was at Helen's memorial service. He brought chrysanthemums and a bottle of soju and sat with me on the back porch until 2 in the morning without saying much at all. Walt. His expression shifted from professional to personal in half a second. "What happened?" "Family dinner," I said. He pulled on gloves and tilted my head under the exam light. His fingers were gentle as he peeled the towel away. I heard his breath catch, the sound a surgeon makes when the wound is worse than expected. "Glass?" "Whiskey bottle. 20 years old. Expensive way to get stitches." He wasn't smiling. "This is deep, Walt. I can see periosteum. Half an inch lower, and it would have hit your temporal artery." He paused. "Who did this?" "My son-in-law." His jaw tightened. "And your daughter?" Watched. Silence. Then he reached for the suture kit. 8 sutures. "You'll have a scar. Take the photographs first." He understood. He pulled out his phone, adjusted the exam light, and began shooting. Front view. Left profile. Close-up with a ruler for scale. The blood trail from temple to jaw. The soaked collar. Each image time-stamped. 11:41 in the evening, December 31st, 2024. "Send them to me," I said. "Keep originals." He nodded and began cleaning the wound. The antiseptic burned like fire. I didn't flinch. 45 years of holding hearts in my hands. You learn to separate pain from panic. Pain is information. Panic is failure. A knock on the door. A uniformed officer stepped in. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, badge catching the light. Her name tag read Brooks. "Mr. Brennan?" "I'm Officer Tanya Brooks. Standard protocol for assault cases. Are you able to give a statement?" "Yes." She sat on the plastic chair while Sam continued stitching. I told her everything calmly. The dinner. The argument about Ryan's supposed medical device business. His inability to answer basic questions about catheter gauges. The escalation. My daughter's outburst. Then the bottle. Did he swing intentionally? She asked. He picked it up by the neck, tightened his grip until his knuckles went white, looked me in the eye. Then he swung. She wrote it all down. Where is Ryan Mercer now? At my house. 512 Chestnut Hill Road. With my daughter Natalie Brennan and his parents, Craig and Diane Mercer. Are you pressing charges? Yes. And I need an emergency protection order tonight. Her pen paused. Sir. Those usually take. My attorney is already working on it. Sam tied off the last suture and applied a sterile bandage. Keep it dry for a week. Come back in 10 days. He hesitated. Walt, are you sure about all this? It's your daughter's home too. It's my home. I said. It's always been my home. He nodded slowly. Helen would have handled this differently. Helen's not here, I said quietly. That's the whole problem. He placed his hand on my shoulder briefly. Then he left. After Officer Brooks finished her notes and handed me her card, I sat alone in exam room 4. Somewhere down the hall, a television played the New Year's countdown. 10, 9, 8. Muffled cheering, confetti and champagne and midnight kisses happening in a world that felt very far away. I pulled out my phone. 2 messages. From Leo Marsh. Received your message. Standing by. Full sweep team. Ready by morning. Say the word. I typed back. The word is go. 10 in the morning. Bring everything. From Kat Blackwell. EPO filed with Judge Robert Whitfield. Reviewing now. Expect signature within the hour. Do not return home alone. At 12:07, my phone buzzed. Kat calling. Walt. Her voice was clipped, efficient. Judge Whitfield signed the EPO 4 minutes ago. Number 81937. Effective immediately. Ryan Mercer. Natalie Brennan. Craig Mercer. Diane Mercer. Barred from your property. 500 feet. 12 months. How soon can officers be there? Dispatching now. 2 units. Arrival 12:45. I'll meet them. Walt. She paused. Your daughter is 7 months pregnant. You understand what this means. I thought about Natalie screaming that I never cared. I thought about Ryan's expensive suit and empty promises. 15 months of freeloading and 1 bottle of whiskey embedded in my skull. I understand. I said. Don't go inside without the officers. I hung up. Walked out through the emergency room doors into the cold mountain air. 2 police cruisers were waiting at the far end of the lot. Engines running. Light bars dark. Officer Brooks stepped out of the first car and gave me a short nod. Mr. Brennan. Ready when you are. I pulled out of the parking lot with 2 cruisers falling in behind me. The streets of Asheville were empty. Christmas lights still blinked in windows. Paper lanterns from New Year's celebrations lay scattered on sidewalks, crushed and damp. The Blue Ridge Mountains sat heavy and black against the sky, invisible except where they blocked the stars. The drive home took 17 minutes. The same 17 minutes as the drive to the hospital. But everything had changed. On the way there, I was a bleeding old man, pressing a towel to his head. On the way back, I was a surgeon with a plan, a protection order, and 2 police cars behind me. Helen used to say the hardest part of surgery wasn't the cutting. It was deciding where to cut. You study the scans. You map the arteries. You plan every incision before the patient reaches the table. Because once you open someone up, there's no going back. I had studied. I had mapped. And now, at 12:43 on the first morning of a new year, I was ready to make the first cut. Every light in my house was still on. Through the front window, I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. They were pacing, waiting. probably arguing about what to do next, whether to call me, whether to run, whether to pretend the whole thing never happened. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment. 2 police cruisers pulled in behind me, their headlights cutting through the dark. No sirens. No light bars. Just engines idling and the crunch of gravel under tires. Officer Marcus Reeves stepped out of the lead cruiser. Tall, mid-40s, built like a man who had played linebacker in college and never quite lost the frame. He approached my window, and I rolled it down. "Mr. Brennan, you have the order?" I showed him the PDF on my phone. EPO number 81937. His eyes scanned it. He nodded. "We'll handle notification. Stay behind us until the residence is secure." I got out of my car and followed the 3 officers up the front steps. My porch. My steps. The ones I had rebuilt 6 years ago, after Helen complained the third board from the left creaked too loudly. I fixed it on a Saturday morning while she sat in the rocking chair, reading Mary Oliver poems aloud to me. That board didn't creak anymore. Reeves knocked. 3 firm raps. The sound carried through the house. The door opened. Natalie stood in the doorway. Her face went from confusion to shock in less than 2 seconds. She had heard the cars. Of course she had. 2 police cruisers don't roll up quietly, even on New Year's Day. But seeing me standing there, bandaged, flanked by officers, was clearly not what she expected. "Dad." Her voice was small. "What is this?" Officer Reeves stepped forward. "Miss Brennan, I'm Officer Reeves with the Buncombe County Sheriff's Department. We need everyone in the residence to come to the front door. Now, please." Behind Natalie, Ryan appeared. Still wearing that charcoal suit, though the tie was loosened and the collar unbuttoned. His eyes went to the officers, then to me, then back to the officers. "What the hell is going on?" "Everyone out front," Reeves said. His tone left no room for negotiation. Craig and Diane emerged from the living room. Craig's salesman's smile had vanished. Diane clutched her handbag with white-knuckled fingers. They stood in a cluster behind Natalie. All 4 of them framed in my doorway like a portrait of a family that had never really been one. Reeves held up his phone, the EPO displayed on screen. "I have an emergency protection order signed by Judge Robert Whitfield at 12:03 a.m. Ryan Mercer, Natalie Brennan, Craig Mercer, and Diane Mercer are hereby ordered to vacate these premises immediately and remain at least 500 feet from Walter Brennan and his property for a period of 12 months. Silence. The kind that rings. Ryan's face drained white. "You can't do this. This is my home. Your name isn't on the deed," I said quietly. "It never was." Craig stepped forward, his voice shifting into something practiced and aggressive. "This is outrageous. We'll sue for emotional distress, wrongful eviction, elder abuse. You're making a huge mistake, Walt." I looked at him. "I'm 70 years old, not incapacitated. I removed a tumor from the governor's heart in 2018. Try again." Diane's voice was sharp. "You're a heartless old man. Helen would be ashamed of you." "Don't," I said. My voice dropped to something cold and surgical. "Talk about my wife." Officer Reeves stepped between us. "You have 30 minutes to collect personal belongings. Identification, medications, clothing only. Nothing that doesn't directly belong to you." They scattered. Natalie went upstairs to the East Wing bedroom she had shared with Ryan for 15 months. I heard drawers slamming, hangers scraping across the closet rod. Ryan darted into the living room, grabbing his phone charger, his jacket, moving fast with the frantic energy of a man cataloging what he would have to leave behind. Craig and Diane stood frozen for a moment. Then Diane muttered something about ungrateful and disappeared into the guest room. Craig followed, his shoulders stiff with barely contained rage. I stood by the front door, arms crossed, watching. Officer Reeves stayed beside me. You doing okay, Mr. Brennan? Fina, this is hard. It's necessary, I corrected. 20 minutes later, they came downstairs. Mismatched luggage, duffel bags, a rolling suitcase with a broken wheel that squeaked against the hardwood. Natalie had thrown a coat over her pajamas. Ryan carried 2 bags, his face rigid with anger. This isn't over, Ryan muttered as he passed me. I didn't respond. Craig shoved past. Diane close behind, shooting me a look that could curdle milk. Natalie was last. She stopped in front of me, tears streaming down her face. One hand pressed to her belly, the other gripping the strap of her bag. She looked so young, so lost. For a moment, I saw the 8-year-old girl who used to sit on my lap in the operating room lounge and ask me how hearts worked. Dad, please, she whispered. I'm 7 months pregnant. Where are we supposed to go? I looked at my daughter, my only child, the last piece of Helen still walking this earth. Do you love him? I asked. She blinked. What? Do you love Ryan? Or do you just need him? Her mouth opened, closed. No answer came. Just tears and silence, and the sound of the old grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. That's what I thought, I said softly. She walked past me without another word. The 4 of them stood in the driveway, luggage piled around them. No car. Ryan had sold his sedan 8 months ago. Said he would buy a new one when his business took off. I reached into my pocket, found the second key on my ring, and tossed it to Ryan. He caught it, confused. The Ford Bronco, I said. 1977. In the garage, it was Helen's. Natalie's eyes widened. Dad, that's Mom's car. I know what it is. Take it. Drive wherever you need to go. Bring it back when you're settled. Ryan stared at the key. Why? Because I'm not a monster, I said. I'm just done being used. They loaded the Bronco in silence. Ryan behind the wheel. Craig and Diane in the back. Natalie in the passenger seat. Before Ryan started the engine, Natalie turned and looked at me through the window. Her expression was something I couldn't read. Anger, grief, betrayal. Or maybe just the look of a woman who was beginning to realize she had chosen the wrong side. I didn't wave. I watched the taillights disappear down Chestnut Hill Road and turn left toward the highway. Then, they were gone. By 1:30, the locksmith I had called from the hospital arrived. Big man, gray beard. He changed 3 locks in 40 minutes. Front door, back door, garage. I paid him $480 cash. By 2 in the morning, the house was mine again. Silent. Empty. I walked through the rooms slowly, checking what they had left behind. A coffee mug in the sink. Helen's scarf on the coat rack, the one Natalie had been wearing. Craig's reading glasses on the side table. And in the living room, on the desk by the window, a Dell laptop. Ryan's. Still plugged in, still charging. The small green light blinking steadily in the darkness. He had forgotten it. Or maybe he thought it didn't matter. Maybe he assumed it was password protected enough that no one would bother. I stood over that laptop for a long time. The green light pulsed like a heartbeat on a monitor. Steady. Patient. Waiting. In 45 years of surgery, I had learned that the most dangerous things are the ones you almost miss. The hairline fracture in an artery wall. The shadow on a scan that could be nothing or could be everything. The small blinking light that says something inside is still alive. I pulled out my phone and called Leo Marsh. Change of plans, I said. When you come tomorrow, bring your forensics kit. There's a laptop here that needs an autopsy. Leo Marsh arrived at 10 the next morning driving a gray SUV that looked like it had seen things it would never talk about. He carried a duffel bag over one shoulder and a hard-shell case in his free hand. Mid-50s, graying at the temples. Sharp eyes that cataloged everything they touched. 20 years with the DEA, before going private. The kind of man who walked into a room and immediately identified every exit. Walt. He shook my hand and looked at the bandage above my eye. You look like you lost a fight with a bottle. The bottle lost, I said. It's in pieces. I'm still standing. He set the duffel on the kitchen table and unzipped it with the careful precision of a man unpacking surgical instruments. Inside were devices I recognized only from crime documentaries. A handheld unit with an antenna, signal analyzers. A forensic laptop, evidence bags. RF detector, he said, holding up the handheld unit. Picks up wireless signals. Cameras, audio bugs, GPS trackers. If something in this house is transmitting, I'll find it. How long? Couple of hours. Depends on how thorough your son-in-law was. We started in the living room. Leo moved slowly, sweeping the detector along walls, behind furniture, under shelves. The device stayed silent. He worked his way past the bookcase, the grandfather clock, the fireplace mantel. Nothing. Then he reached the far wall. My wedding photograph. Helen and me, 43 years ago. On the steps of St. Michael's Church, she wore a simple white dress and a smile that made the whole world feel steady. I had looked at that photograph every day since she died. It was the last thing I saw before bed, and the first thing I saw each morning. The RF detector began chirping. Leo stopped. The beeping intensified as he moved closer to the frame. He lifted the photograph carefully and tilted it forward. There, embedded in the backing, was a lens no larger than a pinhead. Mini camera, Leo said quietly. Wireless. Battery-powered. Motion-activated. Sending footage to a cloud server. He turned the frame slowly and followed the angle of the lens. It pointed directly across the room at my filing cabinet, the one where I kept patient records, medical licenses, insurance documents, and professional correspondence. He wasn't watching you, Leo said. He was watching your files. My stomach dropped. We continued. The second device was under my desk in the study. Leo crawled beneath it and emerged holding a flat, black disc the size of a shirt button. Audio bug. Adhesive backing. 30-foot range. Every conversation I had in that room for 15 months, recorded. The third was under my car. Leo slid beneath the chassis of my Lincoln and came back with a magnetic GPS tracker the size of a matchbox. He knew everywhere you went, Leo said. Every doctor's appointment, every meeting with your lawyer, every time you left the house and how long you were gone. The fourth was behind my desktop computer. A USB keylogger plugged into the back, nearly invisible between the power cord and the monitor cable. Records every keystroke, Leo explained. Passwords, emails, bank logins, everything you typed for 15 months. I stood in the center of my study. 4 devices. 15 months of surveillance. My home, my private life, my medical files, my finances, all of it watched, recorded, cataloged by a man who lived under my roof and shook my hand every morning. Can you trace where the data went? I asked, already working on it. Leo opened his forensic laptop and began running decryption software on Ryan's Dell. The password cracked in under an hour. A 6-digit number. Natalie's birthday. The desktop was generic. Stock photo of mountains. No family pictures. Leo clicked through folders methodically. One folder caught his eye. Labeled Medical Supply Chain. He opened it. Inside were invoices, shipping manifests, and correspondence. All bearing a name I recognized immediately. My name. Walter J. Brennan. M.D. North Carolina Medical License number 47291. Active. Your medical license, Leo said slowly. He's been using it. I leaned closer to the screen. The invoices showed shipments of cardiac stents, catheter kits, and monitoring equipment distributed to 5 small clinics across the Blue Ridge region. Weaverville, Marshall, Burnsville, Spruce Pine, Bakersville, small towns with small practices that trusted a name on a license without asking too many questions. He set up a shell company, Leo said, scrolling through the documents. Blue Ridge Medical Solutions. Registered in your name. Using your license number. These clinics think they're buying FDA-approved equipment from a retired cardiac surgeon. Are they FDA-approved? Leo opened a subfolder labeled Sourcing. The answer hit me like a defibrillator. The devices were manufactured in an unregulated facility overseas. No FDA clearance. No quality control certifications. The stents were counterfeit. The catheters were substandard. The monitoring equipment had never been tested. Ryan had been selling fake medical devices to real patients under my name. Leo clicked on the email folder. One message stopped him. From Dr. Rebecca Torres at Blue Ridge Family Practice in Weaverville. Dated November 15, 2024. To whom it may concern at Blue Ridge Medical Solutions. I am writing to report a serious adverse event involving a cardiac stent purchased through your company. Patient Martha Coleman, age 74. Presented with acute chest pain 6 weeks after stent placement. Emergency imaging revealed the stent had fractured within the left anterior descending artery. The patient required emergency bypass surgery and remains in critical condition. I am requesting an immediate recall of all devices supplied by your company and a full investigation into product integrity. Regards, Dr. Rebecca Torres. I read it twice. Martha Coleman, 74 years old. A woman I had never met, lying in a hospital bed because a stent with my name on the paperwork had shattered inside her heart. I had spent 45 years putting stents into arteries. Carefully. Precisely. Saving lives one heartbeat at a time. And now, someone had used my name, my license, my reputation to do the opposite. My hands were shaking. For the first time in as long as I could remember. Not from fear. Not from cold. From something deeper than that. Something that lived in the space between rage and grief, in the place where a surgeon's oath meets its violation. First, do no harm. My name had done harm. Not my hands, but my name. And in medicine, your name is everything. Leo watched me carefully. Walt, there's more on this laptop. Financial records, offshore accounts, and something else. I looked up. What? I'm still decrypting it. But the file size is large. Hundreds of pages. And Walt. He paused, choosing his words the way a surgeon chooses an incision point. This next part. You need to sit down for it. I didn't sit down. I stood exactly where I was, in the center of my study, surrounded by the ghosts of 15 months of surveillance. And I waited for the next wound to open. Kat Blackwell walked into my study the following afternoon, carrying a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. She sat across from me and dropped it on the desk with a heavy thud. 3 inches. Rubber banded. She pulled the band off slowly, the way a surgeon peels back the final layer of tissue before the organ is exposed. I've been digging into Ryan's finances, she said, and his parents' backgrounds. She looked at me across the desk. Her expression was the one she reserved for cases that had gone from bad to catastrophic. Walt, it's worse than we thought. Show me. She opened the folder. 3 stacks of paper, clipped separately, color-coded, red, blue, yellow, like triage tags in a mass casualty event. She slid the red stack toward me first. Ryan Mercer. Offshore bank account. First Caribbean International Bank, Belize. Opened March 2023. 1 month before he matched with Natalie on the dating app. I scanned the printout. Balance. $215,000. Where did he get this? Kat slid the blue stack across. Craig Mercer. Offshore account in Panama. Banco Nacional. 89,000. Open 2021. She paused. But here's the thing. Craig Mercer doesn't exist. The room went very still. Leo called me an hour ago, she continued. He ran the fingerprints from the water glass Craig left at your house on New Year's Eve. The prints came back to a man named Craig Allen Novak, born 1961, Pittsburgh, former pharmaceutical sales representative, fired in 2012 for selling counterfeit medications. His wife, Diane Mercer, is actually Diane Rose Novak. They've been using fabricated identities since 2015. How many states? 5. Florida, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon. Both have active warrants. Fraud, identity theft, forgery. Craig has a federal warrant out of Texas. Wire fraud, $200,000 in 2018. She leaned back. They've stolen over $2.8 million from elderly victims. Same pattern every time. Target a widower. Get a family member close. Move in. Gather financial intelligence. Then drain the accounts and disappear. I stared at the printouts. Names. Dates. Dollar amounts. A trail of ruined lives stretching across the country like a disease spreading from host to host. And Ryan? Kat pulled out the yellow stack. Ryan never traded crypto. Not once. She spread the pages across my desk. Screenshots of online gambling platforms, offshore poker rooms, sports betting accounts registered in 3 different countries. I pulled his complete transaction history through the shell company accounts. There isn't a single cryptocurrency purchase. No Bitcoin, no Ethereum, nothing. The entire crypto story was fabricated. Then what was he doing with the money? Gambling. And losing. She pointed to a highlighted column. $420,000 in 18 months. Poker. Sports betting. Online casinos hosted in jurisdictions that don't ask questions. He was hemorrhaging cash while living in your house, eating your food, telling you he was building a medical device empire. $420,000. Gone. While I cooked dinner for him and his wife. While I carried groceries upstairs. While he sat in my guest room pretending to work. And my daughter defended him at my own table. It gets worse, Kat said. She reached into the folder and pulled out one more document. A single page. Official letterhead. Insurance company logo at the top. October 2024, she said. 2 months ago. Ryan filed an insurance claim through a subsidiary of the shell company. Reported stolen property. Antique medical instruments. Valued at $560,000. My breath stopped. She slid the claim across the desk. I read it. Claim number 6478321. Property description. Collection of antique surgical instruments. Circa 1850 to 1920. Scalpels, forceps, bone saws, retractors, Civil War amputation kit. Reported stolen from a storage facility in Hendersonville, North Carolina. My collection. Helen's collection. The one she had started with a single amputation kit she found at an estate sale on our 40th wedding anniversary. The one she spent years building, piece by piece, auction by auction, birthday by birthday, until it filled the glass cabinet in our living room, the one Diane had stared at on New Year's Eve, with eyes that said price tag. Status? I asked. My voice sounded far away. Paid in full. $560,000. Wired to the Belize account. On November 8th. November 8th. I closed my eyes. November 8th was a Friday. Ryan had offered to take Natalie to her 20-week ultrasound that afternoon. I had stayed home. I told him I was proud of him for stepping up. I said those words to his face while $560,000 of my wife's legacy was being wired into his offshore account. He claimed ownership through forged documents, Kat continued. Fabricated purchase receipts. Fake appraisal letters. The insurance company never verified. They just paid. And the collection is still in my living room, I said. Exactly. He reported them stolen, collected the payout, and left them sitting behind glass in your house. The insurance company has no idea they were never missing. I sat very still. The study was quiet except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Helen's clock. Helen's collection. Helen's recipes. Helen's china, now stained with my blood. Everything they had touched, they had contaminated. He didn't just steal from me, I said quietly. He stole from her. Kat watched me for a moment. Then she gathered the papers into a single pile and squared the edges against the desk. Walt, we have enough for criminal charges. Fraud. Identity theft. Insurance fraud. The offshore accounts alone will get federal attention. Not yet. She raised an eyebrow. Leo said there's more on the laptop. A large file. Hundreds of pages. He's still decrypting it. What kind of file? I don't know yet. But I want everything before we move. Every piece. Every page. I want to know the full extent of what they planned before I decide how to end it. Kat nodded slowly. All right. But Walt, we can't wait too long. If Craig and Diane realize we're investigating, they'll run. They've done it before. 5 states. They know how to disappear. They won't run, I said. They think they're still in control. They think I'm just an angry old man who kicked them out on New Year's Eve. And what are you? I looked at the folder on my desk. 2.8 million stolen. 560,000 in insurance fraud. 420,000 gambling losses. Federal fugitives living in my guest room for 15 months. My wife's surgical instruments claimed as stolen property while sitting 10 feet from where I slept every night. I'm a surgeon, I said. And I'm not done cutting. My phone buzzed. Leo. I put it on speaker. Walt. Kat. I need you both to hear this. His voice had changed. The professional calm was still there, but underneath it was something harder. Something urgent. I finished decrypting the financial records, but I also found something on the laptop that changes everything. What is it? Kat asked. A life insurance policy. Yours, Walt. Modified. 6 months ago. The beneficiary was changed from Natalie to Ryan, and the coverage was increased from $500,000 to $2.5 million. The room went silent. There's an email chain attached, Leo continued. Between Ryan and Craig. 3 messages. The last one is dated December 18th, 13 days before the bottle hit your face. He paused. Walt, I think you need to read it yourself, but I'll tell you this much. They weren't just planning to rob you. They were planning something much worse. Kat looked at me. I looked at the phone. Send it, I said. Send everything. In 45 years of medicine, I had signed hundreds of death certificates. Cause of death, written in my own hand. Cardiac arrest. Aortic dissection. Respiratory failure. Pulmonary embolism. Each one a life I had tried to save and lost. Each one a name I carried. I never imagined someone would try to write mine. Leo's email arrived at 9:17 that evening. I sat alone in my study, the desk lamp casting a warm circle of light across the oak surface. Outside, the Blue Ridge Mountains had disappeared into darkness. The house was silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock. Helen's clock. Counting seconds, I was no longer certain I had. I opened the first attachment. A scanned document. Pacific Northwest Mutual Life Insurance. Policy number 7741803. Policyholder. Walter James Brennan. The original policy was straightforward. $500,000. Beneficiary. Natalie Ann Brennan. I had taken it out 12 years ago when Helen was first diagnosed. Standard planning. Responsible. The kind of thing a surgeon does when he understands mortality better than most. The modified version was dated June 15th, 2024. 6 months ago. The coverage had been increased to $2.5 million. The beneficiary had been changed from Natalie Ann Brennan to Ryan James Mercer. The signature at the bottom was mine. Except it wasn't. The letters were close, the slant nearly right. But I could see the hesitation in the crossbar of the T and the slight wobble in the tail of the N. I had signed my name on thousands of surgical consent forms, prescription pads, and patient charts. I knew my own handwriting the way a musician knows their instrument. This was a forgery. A careful one, but a forgery nonetheless. I opened the second attachment. The email chain Leo had mentioned. 3 messages between Ryan and Craig. The first was dated October 3rd, 2024. From Craig. Policy modification confirmed. New beneficiary in place. Coverage doubled. Total payout on event. $2.5 million. Timeline? From Ryan. Patience. We need it to look natural. The old surgeon has a family history. Helen died of pancreatic cancer. But her father had a cardiac event at 72. Bad heart runs in the family. 1 accident, 1 missed medication, and we collect. From Craig. Dated December 18th. 13 days before New Year's Eve. 13 days before the bottle. Contingency update. If direct approach fails, we pivot to mountain scenario. Blue Ridge Parkway. Brake line. Winter conditions provide cover. Coroner rules accident. Insurance pays within 90 days. Melissa inherits remainder through custody claim post-birth. I read the name Melissa and stopped. Craig had written Melissa, not Natalie. Melissa was one of their previous victims' daughters, from a different operation. A different family they had destroyed. He had confused the names, mixed up which con he was running. My daughter was so interchangeable to them that they couldn't even keep her name straight. I set the phone down on the desk. My hands were trembling. Not the fine micro-tremor of fatigue that surgeons learn to work through. This was deeper. This came from a place I had never accessed in 45 years of medicine. The place where fear meets fury, and the body can't tell the difference. They were going to kill me, not metaphorically, not financially. They were going to cut my brake lines on a mountain road in January and let gravity and ice do the rest. The Blue Ridge Parkway, the road I drove every Thursday evening to my cardiology checkup with Dr. Warren. The road that wound through switchbacks and blind curves 2,000 feet above the valley floor. The road where Helen and I used to park on summer evenings and watch the sunset paint the mountains gold and rose. They wanted me dead on that road. I stood up from the desk and walked to the window. The mountains were invisible in the dark, but I knew they were there. I had lived in their shadow for 30 years. I had driven those roads 1,000 times, navigated those curves with the automatic confidence of a man who trusted the world beneath his wheels. Now I understood why Ryan had installed the GPS tracker under my car. Not just to monitor my movements, to study them, to learn which roads I took, how fast I drove, which curves I slowed for, and which ones I didn't. To map my route to Dr. Warren's office, the way I used to map a patient's arterial system before surgery. Find the weak point. Apply pressure. Wait for the rupture. I pulled out my phone and called Leo. I read everything, I said. And? They mixed up Natalie's name. Craig called her Melissa in the December email. That's someone else's daughter from a previous job. Leo was quiet for a moment. That confirms what I suspected. This isn't their first time planning something like this. How many others? I'm still checking. But the document I mentioned, the large file on the laptop, I finished decrypting it an hour ago. Walt. It's a master plan. 52 pages. It covers everything from the day Ryan met Natalie to the projected date of your death. My death. Projected. Like a line item on a spreadsheet. Like a surgical outcome predicted by an algorithm. What's it called? I asked. Brennan Medical Estate Plan. Leo paused. It's the most detailed criminal operation document I've seen in 20 years, with the DEA. Phase 1 through Phase 4. Psychological profiles. Financial projections. Contingency protocols. They mapped your entire life, Walt. Your grief, your loneliness, your desire to reconnect with Natalie. They turned your love for your daughter into an entry point and your love for your wife into a vulnerability. I closed my eyes. Behind the darkness, I saw Helen. Not the Helen who was sick, not the Helen in the hospital bed at the end, but the Helen who stood on the porch of this house the day we finished building it. Hands on her hips, sawdust in her hair, laughing because the front door hung crooked, and I couldn't figure out why. She had said, "It's not perfect, Walt, but it's ours, and we'll fix it together." We fixed everything together. The crooked door, the leaking roof, the garden that wouldn't grow until she talked to it every morning, like it was a patient who needed encouragement. We fixed a 30-year marriage through stubbornness and patience and the kind of love that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. And now 2 men in a motel room had reduced all of it, every memory, every heartbeat, every whispered goodnight, to a 52-page document with a projected death date and a $2.5 million payout. "Send me the file," I said. "Walt, it's late. Maybe you should. Send it, Leo. I need to read every word." He sent it. I opened the file at 11:47 that night. Alone. The title page had no author, just a file name and a date. Brennan Medical Estate Plan, created March 15th, 2023. 2 months before Ryan Mercer ever said hello to my daughter. I poured cold coffee I didn't remember making and began to read. Page 1. No author listed. No company logo. Just a title, a date, and the cold efficiency of someone who had done this before. Target profile. Walter James Brennan. Age 70. Widowed. Spouse. Helen Marie Brennan. Deceased October 2021. Net worth estimated at $7.1 million. Primary residence valued at $3.8 million. Antique surgical instrument collection. $600,000. Investment portfolio. $1.2 million. Pension. $92,000 annually. Life insurance. $500,000. Since modified, they had cataloged everything down to the dollar. Like I was inventory on a shelf, waiting to be liquidated. The next section cut deeper. Psychological profile. Subject exhibits classic markers of a vulnerable elderly widower. Socially isolated. No close friends or extended family beyond estranged daughter. Primary emotional connection. Natalie Ann Brennan. Subject demonstrates strong guilt regarding failed relationship with daughter and intense desire for reconciliation. Fear of dying alone is the primary motivational driver. Recommended approach. Establish romantic relationship with daughter. Exploit gratitude and desire for family unity. I set the laptop down. They hadn't just studied my finances. They had studied my grief. 3 years of eating alone. 3 years of talking to Helen's flowers because there was no one else. 3 years of wanting my daughter back and not knowing how to reach her. They saw a lonely old man and built a business plan around his loneliness. Pages 12 through 26. Phase 1. Infiltration. April 2023. Initial contact via dating application. Daughter matched with operative. First date April 12th. Relationship accelerated using standard bonding techniques. Mirroring. Vulnerability disclosure. Future projection. Future projection. Talking about a shared future early to create false permanence. Ryan told Natalie he wanted children within 2 months. Talked about buying a house. Growing old together. All scripted. Every whispered promise a line from a playbook. August. Engagement after 4 months. Ring purchased with funds from a previous operation. The ring on my daughter's finger was bought with money stolen from another victim. September. Operative introduced to Walter Brennan. Presented as respectful, deferential, career-oriented. I remembered that day. Ryan shook my hand on this porch. Called me sir. Asked about my career with what seemed like genuine curiosity. I had liked him. God help me. I had liked him. December. Marriage. Reception. Funded by subject. $14,000. January 2024. Move into residence. Surveillance equipment installed within 48 hours. January 7th. I remembered. Boxes in the hallway. Me carrying a dresser upstairs, joking that the house finally felt like a home. Ryan laughing. Natalie smiling. And while I was laughing, he was installing cameras behind my wedding photograph. Pages 27 through 38. Phase 2. Dependency. February. Operative quits employment. Cover story. Downsizing. March. Craig and Diane introduced under eviction narrative. Subject invites temporary stay. April through December. Financial dependency deepened. Daughter conditioned to defend operative through emotional manipulation. Wedge between subject and daughter widened systematically. Every argument where Natalie defended Ryan. Every dinner where she looked at me with disappointment. Every time she said I was being unfair. All manufactured. All scripted. Pages 39 through 45. Phase 3. Pregnancy. Subject's daughter must conceive no later than August 2024. Pregnancy provides emotional leverage through subject's desire for grandchild. Legal leverage via custody claims. Financial leverage as pregnant daughter is less likely to leave operative. Confirmed pregnancy August. Due date. April 2025. They had scheduled my grandchild. Timed the conception like a construction phase. My daughter's pregnancy wasn't love. It was a chess move. Pages 46 through 50. Phase 4. Exit strategy. April 2025. Child born. Operative and Craig disappear with remaining funds. No forwarding address. Daughter, exhausted and abandoned, returns to subject with newborn. Probability 95%. October. Diane resurfaces as concerned grandmother. Files custody claim, citing daughter's instability. Subject's advanced age. Unsafe environment. Goal. Secure custody. $2,000 monthly child support. Long-term inheritance access through grandchild. They were going to abandon Natalie. Leave her with a newborn. Broken. Nowhere to go but back to me. Then use my grandchild as a tool to bleed me for the rest of my life. Page 51. Contingency protocol. Operative denies all knowledge. Claims daughter was primary planner and manipulator. Subject more likely to believe daughter orchestrated scheme. Natalie has no knowledge of offshore accounts, surveillance, or documents. She cannot refute accusations. If necessary, sacrifice daughter's credibility to protect operative. I read that 3 times. If caught, they would blame Natalie. Destroy her reputation. Paint her as the architect. And she would have no defense, because she didn't know any of it existed. My daughter wasn't his wife. She was his scalpel. A tool to cut into my life. And when the tool was no longer useful, he would throw it away. Page 52. Appendix. Previous operations. 7 targets. All elderly widowers. All retired physicians. Florida, Texas, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, Washington, Georgia. 2012 through 2023. Total funds acquired. 2.8 million. Most victims never reported. Too ashamed. I was number 8. I closed the laptop. The screen went dark. The study was silent except for the clock and the wind pressing against the windows. I sat in Helen's chair, the worn leather one from the Hendersonville estate sale. If I leaned close enough, I could still catch her scent in the fabric. Lavender and old books, and something I could never name but would recognize anywhere. She used to say something when I came home frustrated from a surgery where I lost the patient. You can't save everyone, Walt. But you can save the ones who matter. I looked at the dark screen, then at Helen's photograph on the desk, then at the window, where the mountains hid behind January clouds. The one who mattered most was sleeping in a motel room 30 miles away. 7 months pregnant, defending a man who had planned her entire life like a disease. She didn't know about the 52 pages. She didn't know about the death policy, or the plan to abandon her, or the contingency protocol that would sacrifice her to protect him. She thought I was the villain. She thought I had thrown her out because I didn't care. She had no idea I was the only one trying to save her. But if I told her now, she would defend him. She would say I was lying. She would choose him the way she chose him on New Year's Eve. No. She had to see it herself. And I had to find a way to show her, without breaking her completely. I sat in Helen's chair until the sky outside began to lighten. Then I stood, walked to the window, and looked east toward the mountains. Somewhere beyond those ridges, my daughter was waking up in a decaying motel room next to a man who had never loved her. I was a surgeon. I had spent my life opening people up, finding what was killing them, and cutting it out. This was no different. The patient was my family. The tumor was named Ryan Mercer. And the most delicate part of the operation was still ahead, saving Natalie, without losing her forever. The coffee shop sat at the edge of town where Marymount Avenue narrowed into a 2-lane road climbing toward the reservoir. Mountain grounds. A converted gas station with exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, and the kind of silence that attracted people who wanted to disappear into their mugs for an hour. I had been coming here since Helen's first round of chemo, back when I needed a place that didn't smell like antiseptic or sympathy. I arrived at 7:14 a.m. on January 7th, 3 days after reading the 52-page document that had kept me awake every night since. The barista, a young woman with a septum piercing and a Appalachian State hoodie, poured my usual black coffee without asking. I took the corner booth near the emergency exit, a habit from decades of scanning operating rooms for the nearest crash cart. Kat Blackwell walked in at 7:22. She wore a charcoal overcoat and carried a leather messenger bag that looked heavier than she did. Behind her, Leo Marsh held the door open with one hand and balanced a manila folder thick enough to require a spine in the other. They didn't greet each other. They didn't greet me. Kat slid into the booth across from me. Leo took the chair at the end, positioning himself with a clear sightline to both entrances. "You look terrible," Kat said. "I've looked worse. Post-op, 36-hour shift, 1,994. She didn't smile. She opened her bag and placed a single sheet of paper face down on the table. "Before we start, I need you to sign this. Attorney-client privilege extension covering Leo as a consulting investigator. Everything said in this booth stays protected." I signed without reading it. Kat raised an eyebrow. "I spent 3 days reading a 52-page plan to steal my life and possibly end it," I said. "A signature is the least dangerous thing I've done this week." Leo opened the manila folder. Inside were color-coded tabs, red, yellow, blue, green, each section thick with printed documents, photographs, and handwritten notes in Leo's precise block lettering. He spread the contents across the table, like a surgeon laying out instruments before an operation. I recognized the instinct. Every tool visible. Every tool accounted for. "Red tab," Leo began. "Financial crimes. We've confirmed the offshore structure. The Belize account at Caribbean Trust International holds $215,000. The Panama account at Grupo Financiero del Istmo holds $143,000. Both accounts were opened using your Social Security number and a forged power of attorney dated June 2023. The signature doesn't match yours. Kat had a handwriting analyst confirm that yesterday." He slid a comparison sheet toward me. My real signature on the left, the forgery on the right. The forger had been competent, but careless. They'd replicated the general shape of my W, but missed the characteristic tail on my final N, a quirk from 4 decades of signing surgical consent forms under fluorescent lights. Yellow tab, Leo continued. Insurance fraud. The $560,000 claim filed with Atlantic Mutual for the alleged theft of your surgical instrument collection? We pulled the police report. It was filed by Craig Mercer using your name on the 12th of September 2024. The instruments were never stolen. They're in a storage unit in Fletcher Unit 47B, rented under the name Alan Novak, which is Craig's real name. I drove there yesterday. Padlock, no security cameras, but the rental agreement lists a phone number that traces back to Diane's burner. Kat tapped the table. That's federal wire fraud on top of insurance fraud. The claim crossed state lines because Atlantic Mutual processes in Virginia. Blue tab, Leo said. The medical device operation, Blue Ridge Medical Solutions, has shipped 847 units of counterfeit cardiac equipment to 5 clinics over 14 months. I spoke with Dr. Rebecca Torres again yesterday. Martha Coleman isn't the only victim. There are 2 additional patients. A 58-year-old male in Marshall who required stent replacement, and a 63-year-old female in Burnsville currently showing signs of device degradation. Torres is preparing formal adverse event reports for the FDA. I set my coffee down. 3 patients. 3 people whose hearts held cheap metal, stamped with my license number. The weight of it pressed against my sternum like a fist. Green tab. Leo's voice dropped half a register. The life insurance alteration and the brake line references. I had a contact at the National Insurance Crime Bureau run the policy change. The modification from $500,000 to $2.5 million was processed by a regional agent in Hendersonville named Paul Whitaker. Whitaker has since been terminated by Northwestern Mutual for a separate fraud complaint. He's cooperating. Cooperating how? I asked. He confirmed that Craig Mercer, operating as Alan Novak, visited his office on the 3rd of April 2024 with a notarized authorization form. Forged, obviously. Whitaker didn't verify. He pocketed a $4,200 commission and filed the paperwork. He's willing to testify. Kat pulled a second document from her bag. I've drafted a formal complaint to the Buncombe County District Attorney and a parallel referral to the FBI's Charlotte Field Office. Agent Diana Cortez has been assigned. She specializes in elder financial exploitation and has a conviction rate north of 92%. I looked at the spread of evidence on the table. Red, yellow, blue, green. 4 colors. 4 categories of betrayal. In surgery, we use a similar system, color-coded clamps, to track which vessels have been isolated and which still carry blood flow. Craig and Diane Mercer had built an arterial network of fraud running through every part of my life. My finances, my insurance, my medical license, my daughter. There's one more thing, Leo said. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a small black phone, a prepaid burner, the kind you buy at a gas station for $29.99. This is for Natalie. If she's willing to help, she calls this number. Only this number. It routes through a relay that Kat's office controls. No GPS, no metadata, no trace back to you. And if she's not willing? Leo paused. Kat looked at me with the expression I'd seen on oncologists delivering staging results. Then we proceed without her, Kat said. But the case is stronger with an inside witness. Significantly stronger. I picked up the burner phone. It weighed almost nothing. I slid it into my coat pocket next to Helen's stethoscope, which I'd been carrying since New Year's Eve like a talisman. I'll find a way to reach her, I said. Leo gathered the folder and closed it. Kat finished her coffee in one long sip. Outside, the Blue Ridge Mountains were wrapped in January fog, the peaks invisible, the valleys gray and still. I thought about Natalie, 7 months pregnant, living in a motel room with a man who had written a 52-page plan to destroy her father, sleeping next to a family whose real name she might not even know. I left Mountain Grounds at 8:03 a.m. The burner phone sat in my left pocket, Helen's stethoscope in my right. 2 instruments. One to listen, One to speak. I sent the email at 9:17 p.m. on January 8th. It took me 14 hours to write 3 paragraphs. 14 hours to find words that would reach my daughter without alerting the people sleeping in the room next to hers. I wrote it from a new Gmail account, wbrennan.ridge@gmail.com, using a laptop Leo had swept and encrypted that morning. The subject line read, "From Dad, please read alone." The body was simple. I told Natalie I loved her. I told her I knew things about Ryan and his parents that she needed to hear. I told her there was a phone, a small black prepaid phone, and that if she was willing to listen, I would find a way to get it to her. I did not mention the 52 pages. I did not mention the forged insurance policy, or the break line emails, or the counterfeit stents sitting inside 3 patients' chests with my name stamped on them. I gave her just enough to crack the door, not enough to slam it shut. She responded at 11:42 p.m. 2 words. Where? When? No punctuation, no greeting, no signature. But she responded. And those 2 words told me everything I needed to know. Natalie Brennan, my daughter, the girl who had once dissected a fetal pig in 9th grade biology and narrated the entire procedure to her horrified classmates with the confidence of a chief resident, was still in there, buried under 14 months of manipulation, 7 months of pregnancy, and whatever version of reality Ryan and his parents had constructed around her. But still in there. Leo arranged the handoff. January 9th, 3:15 p.m. The parking lot of the Ingalls grocery store on Tunnel Road. Natalie would be buying prenatal vitamins, a routine errand Ryan never accompanied her on. Leo's contact, a woman named Sheila who ran a domestic violence advocacy nonprofit in East Asheville, would be parked in a silver Honda Accord, 3 spaces from the entrance. The burner phone would be inside a box of organic chamomile tea on the passenger seat. Natalie would knock on the window, take the box, and walk away. 30 seconds. No conversation. No eye contact longer than necessary. It worked. At 4:08 p.m., the burner phone rang once on Kat's relay system. A single ring, then silence. The signal we had agreed upon. Natalie had the phone. Day 1. January 9th. Evening. She called at 10:33 p.m. I was sitting in Helen's reading chair, the green wingback by the bay window, that still smelled faintly of her lavender hand cream, even after 2 years. I answered on the second ring. Dad. Her voice was thin. Not weak thin. Like a wire pulled taut enough to vibrate, but not yet snap. I'm here, sweetheart. Silence. 8 seconds. I counted them the way I count seconds during cardiac arrest. Each one, a universe. Ryan told me you filed the protection order because you're trying to take the baby, she said. He said you hired a lawyer to petition for emergency custody. He said Craig found a precedent in North Carolina law where a grandparent can seize custody if the mother is deemed mentally unstable. I closed my eyes. Of course. The Mercer playbook. Isolate the target. Control the narrative. Weaponize fear. Natalie? None of that is true. I know. 2 words again. But this time they carried weight. The weight of a woman who had spent 14 months hearing one version of the world and was beginning to suspect she had been living inside a carefully constructed lie. How do you know? I asked. Because I found something. 3 weeks ago, before New Year's, I was looking for the car insurance card in Craig's briefcase. There was a folder behind it. A thick folder. I only saw the first page before Diane walked in and I had to close it. But I saw enough. What did you see? My name. Your name. The house address. And a number $7.2 million. Circled. In red ink. The 52-page plan. She had seen the cover page. Natalie, I need you to listen carefully. That folder is a detailed plan to take everything I own. The house, the accounts, the investments, my medical license. It includes forged documents, offshore bank accounts, and a scheme involving counterfeit medical devices sold under my name. 3 patients have been harmed. One of them is a 74-year-old woman named Martha Coleman, who nearly died on an operating table because a stent with my license number fractured inside her heart. Silence again. Longer this time. 12 seconds. There's more, I said. They changed my life insurance policy. From $500,000 to $2.5 million. They switched the beneficiary from you to Ryan. And there are emails between Craig and Ryan discussing how to make my death look like an accident on the Blue Ridge Parkway. I heard her breathing change. Not faster, deeper. The way a patient breathes when anesthesia begins to wear off, and the first wave of pain reaches the brain before the mind can process what the pain means. Dodd. Oh God. Dodd. You don't have to do anything tonight, I said. You don't have to decide anything. But I need to ask you one question, and I need you to answer honestly. Ask, are you safe? Right now. Tonight. Are you physically safe? Yes. Ryan's asleep. Craig and Diane went to a bar on Haywood Road. They won't be back until after midnight. Good. Here's what I need you to do over the next several days. Small things. Nothing that changes your routine. Nothing that raises suspicion. Can you do that? Tell me what you need. I leaned forward in Helen's chair. The leather creaked. Outside, the January wind pressed against the bay window, carrying the sound of bare dogwood branches scraping the gutter. I need you to be my eyes inside that motel room, I said. Photographs, conversations, documents, anything you can capture without putting yourself at risk. The phone has a camera and a voice recorder. Use them only when you're alone. Delete nothing. Send everything to the number saved in contacts under the name Helen. She was quiet for a moment. Then, you named the contact after Mom. Yes. Okay, Dad. Her voice steadied, not warm. Not yet, but solid. Like bone setting after a fracture. I'll do it. Tell me when to start. Tomorrow morning. Day 1. Day 2. January 10th. The first photograph arrived at 6:47 a.m. Natalie had waited until Ryan left for his morning run, a habit he maintained with military precision. 6:30 to 7:15, 3 miles along the French Broad River Trail before opening Craig's briefcase. The image was slightly blurred at the edges, taken in low light with a trembling hand. But the content was unmistakable. A spreadsheet printed on legal-sized paper. Columns filled with Craig's blocky handwriting. Account numbers, transfer dates, dollar amounts. At the top, underlined twice. Phase 3. Asset liquidation timeline. Below it, a list of Walt Brennan's holdings organized by estimated value and projected transfer date. The house. $3.8 million. Target date. March 2025. The investment portfolio. $2.1 million. Target date April 2025. The surgical instrument collection. $600,000. Already marked acquired in red ink. Already acquired. I called Leo at 7:02 a.m. The surgical instruments, I said. They've already moved them. Storage unit 47B in Fletcher. I told you about it 3 days ago. No. I mean, the collection is marked as acquired on their internal timeline. They're not just storing them. They've already sold pieces. Check auction records Christie's, Heritage Auctions, private medical antique dealers. My 1,847 Liston amputation set alone is worth $180,000. If it's surfaced anywhere in the last 6 months, there'll be a trail. Leo was quiet for 4 seconds. I'll have results by tonight. By 9:30 p.m., he did. 3 items from my collection had been sold through a private dealer in Atlanta named Gerald Voss. The Liston set, $162,000. A Civil War field surgery kit, $94,000. A set of 19th century silver-handled tree panning instruments, $70,000. $1,000. Total, $327,000. All proceeds wired to the Belize account at Caribbean Trust International. Gerald Voss had dealt exclusively with a man calling himself Alan Novak, who presented a notarized letter of authorization from Dr. Walter Brennan granting permission to sell. The forgery was getting easier to trace, but the betrayal wasn't getting easier to absorb. Day 3. January 11th. Natalie sent 4 photographs and 1 audio recording. The photographs showed contents of Diane's suitcase, a zippered pouch containing 7 prepaid Visa gift cards totaling $3,500, 3 sets of identification in different names. Diane Mercer, Diane Novak, Diana Mitchell, and a handwritten list of pharmacy contacts in Tennessee and Georgia. The medical device supply chain extended further than Leo had estimated. The audio recording was 43 seconds long. Craig and Ryan, speaking in the motel kitchenette while Natalie pretended to shower. Craig's voice. The old man's lawyer filed the EPO fast. Faster than I expected. We need to accelerate the cardiology angle. Get him into a stress test. The Parkway plan is back up, only too much forensic exposure. A medical event is cleaner. Ryan. I already scheduled the appointment. January 17th. Dr. Sato, at Blue Ridge Cardiology. I called as his son-in-law. Said he'd been having chest pains since New Year's. Craig. Good. And the medication? Ryan. Diane's handling it. She's got the dosage calculated. Mixed into his blood pressure prescription. Gradual. Undetectable. In a standard tox panel. I played the recording 3 times. Then I set the phone on Helen's nightstand and walked to the bathroom and gripped the edges of the porcelain sink until my knuckles turned white. 45 years of surgical training had taught me to compartmentalize, to separate emotion from action, to hold a beating heart in my hands and think only of the next suture, the next clamp, the next breath from the ventilator. But this was different. This was my son-in-law calmly discussing how to poison me. This was Craig Mercer Alan Novak, whatever his name was, treating my death like a logistics problem. I called Kat Blackwell at 10:15 p.m. We have them discussing murder, I said. On tape. Send it to the relay. I'll have Agent Cortez on the phone within the hour. Day 4. January 12th. Agent Diana Cortez arrived in Asheville on a 6 a.m. flight from Charlotte. We met at Kat's office on Pack Square at 8:30 a.m. A 3rd-floor suite with walnut bookshelves and a view of the Vance Monument. Cortez was younger than I expected. Early 40s, dark hair pulled back, a navy blazer over a white blouse. She carried a leather portfolio and spoke with the kind of deliberate economy that reminded me of the best attending physicians. No wasted words, every sentence diagnostic. She listened to the audio recording twice without expression. Then she opened her portfolio and laid out a federal case framework on Kat's conference table. Here's where we stand, Cortez said. Wire fraud confirmed, multiple counts. Insurance fraud confirmed. The Atlantic Mutual claim and the life insurance alteration. Identity theft confirmed. The offshore accounts and the Gerald Voss transactions. Elder financial exploitation confirmed under North Carolina statute. Conspiracy to distribute adulterated medical devices confirmed, with 3 documented patient injuries. She paused and looked directly at me. And now, based on this recording, conspiracy to commit murder. That elevates everything. Federal jurisdiction is clear. I'm requesting a multi-agency task force, FBI, FDA Criminal Division, and local law enforcement coordination through the Buncombe County Sheriff. Timeline? Kat asked. We need 5 more days of intelligence from your daughter, Cortez said to me. Specifically, physical evidence of the medication tampering, documentation of the January 17th cardiology appointment setup, and any additional recordings that confirm Craig Mercer's involvement in the murder conspiracy. 5 days gives us enough for an airtight RICO predicate. 5 days. January 13th through January 17th. The same day, they had scheduled my fraudulent cardiology appointment with Dr. Sato. The appointment becomes the trap, I said. Cortez allowed herself the faintest trace of a smile. Now you're thinking like an agent, Dr. Brennan. No, I said. I'm thinking like a surgeon. You don't remove a tumor on the tumor's schedule. You choose the moment when it's most exposed. Kat closed her notebook. Leo crossed his arms. Cortez nodded once. 5 days, I confirmed. Tell Natalie to keep recording. Day 5. January 13th. Leo Marsh arrived at my house at 7 a.m., carrying 2 black Pelican cases and a rolled blueprint of my floor plan that he'd drawn from memory after his first sweep. He spread the blueprint across the dining table, the same table where Ryan had shattered the Balvenie bottle 13 days earlier, and began marking positions with a red felt-tip pen. 6 cameras, he said. Pinhole lenses. Battery life. 70. 2 hours. Resolution high enough to read a prescription label from across the room. He pointed to each location. Camera 1. The foyer ceiling. Concealed inside the smoke detector housing, covering the front entrance and the first 8 feet of hallway. Camera 2. The living room bookshelf, tucked behind a framed photograph of Helen and me at Lake Lure, angled toward the couch and coffee table. Camera 3. The kitchen, embedded in the decorative molding above the refrigerator, capturing the island counter and the back door. Camera 4. My study, mounted inside a defunct desk lamp, aimed at the filing cabinet and computer. Camera 5. The master bedroom doorway, hidden inside the frame of Helen's watercolor painting, the one she'd bought in Provence, the summer before she got sick. Camera 6. The garage, attached to the overhead track lighting, covering the Lincoln Navigator and the workbench where I kept my tool chest. 6 eyes. Every room they would need to enter. Every surface they would need to touch. Audio? I asked. Each unit has a built-in omnidirectional microphone. Picks up a whisper at 20 feet. Feeds directly to a secure server that Kat's office controls. Agent Cortez will have real-time access from the FBI mobile command vehicle. Where's the command vehicle? Parking lot of the Calvary Baptist Church. Half a mile down Elk Mountain Road. Close enough for a 3-minute response. Far enough to avoid visual detection, Leo opened the second Pelican case. Inside, arranged in foam cutouts like surgical instruments in a sterilization tray, were 6 devices no larger than a coat button. He began installation at 7:30 a.m. I watched him work with the same quiet focus I recognized from my own operating rooms. No unnecessary movements, no wasted steps, each placement measured twice before commitment. By 9:15 a.m., all 6 cameras were live. Leo tested each feed on a tablet, rotating through angles, adjusting sensitivity, confirming timestamp synchronization. Clean, he said. Invisible to visual inspection. Undetectable by standard RF sweep. They operate on a frequency-hopping protocol that changes channels every 1.8 seconds. Kat Blackwell arrived at 10 a.m. with Agent Cortez. They reviewed the feeds in my study, cycling through all 6 views on Leo's tablet, while Kat mapped each camera to the evidentiary chain she was building. The warrant structure is set, Cortez said. Judge Whitfield signed the surveillance authorization this morning at 8:45. Federal warrant for electronic monitoring of Walter Brennan's residence. Effective immediately. Valid through January 20th. We're also running parallel warrants for the Blue Ridge Motor Lodge Room 14. Registered to Alan Novak and the storage unit in Fletcher. She placed 3 folders on the desk. Each one bore a red sealed stamp. Simultaneous execution, Cortez continued. The moment we have enough from the house cameras, all 3 locations go active. FBI tactical team handles the motel. Buncombe County deputies take the storage unit. Local PD secures this house. No gaps. No escape routes. And Natalie? I asked. Natalie is our primary concern, Cortez said. Her voice shifted not softer, but more precise. the way a surgeon adjusts pressure when approaching a major vessel. She's 7 months pregnant and embedded with 3 individuals now, under federal investigation for conspiracy to commit murder. We've arranged an extraction protocol. The moment we initiate the operation, a female agent, Agent Ruiz, will enter the motel through the service corridor and escort Natalie to a secure vehicle. She'll be at Mission Hospital within 15 minutes. She doesn't know about the extraction yet, I said. No. And she shouldn't. Not until the morning of. The fewer people who know the operational timeline, the lower the risk of behavioral changes that Craig or Diane might detect. I understood. In surgery, you don't tell the patient's family the exact minute you plan to clamp the aorta. You tell them the procedure. You tell them the expected duration. You don't give them the moment-by-moment sequence because anxiety changes behavior, and changed behavior introduces variables, and variables kill. Day 6. January 14th. Natalie sent 11 photographs and 3 audio recordings. The photographs documented Diane's pharmacy contacts' text messages on a second phone Diane kept inside a hollowed-out hardcover novel on the motel nightstand. The texts confirmed shipments of tampered blood pressure medication lisinopril capsules, refilled with a compound that, over weeks of ingestion, would induce cardiac arrhythmia mimicking natural heart failure. Diane had sourced the compound through a veterinary pharmaceutical contact in Knoxville. The dosage was precise, professional, the work of someone who had done this before. The audio recordings captured 2 conversations. In the first, Ryan rehearsed a phone call to 911 practicing grief, modulating his voice from shock to sobbing, timing the pauses between sentences. He ran through it 4 times, each performance smoother than the last. In the second recording, Craig reviewed the January 17th timeline with Diane. Walt arrives at Dr. Sato's office at 10:00 a.m. Stress test begins at 10:30. If the medication has taken sufficient effect, cardiac event occurs during exertion. If not, the Parkway Plan activates the following week. I listened to my son-in-law rehearse, crying over my death. I listened to him practice the word father-in-law with manufactured anguish, adjusting his tone the way an actor adjusts for a second take. 4 rehearsals. 4 performances of grief for a man they intended to murder. I set the phone down and looked at Helen's stethoscope hanging on the bedpost. I had 2 days left. 48 hours before the 17th. Day 7. January 15th. Natalie called at 11:58 p.m. Her voice was barely above a whisper. They moved the timeline up. Craig is nervous about the EPO hearing on the 20th. He wants it done before the court date. Ryan confirmed the appointment with Dr. Sato for the 17th, but Craig added something new: they're coming to the house first. The morning of. Ryan convinced the others that he needs to collect personal belongings. He's going to ask you to let them in. All 3 of them? All 4. Craig, Diane, Ryan, and me. Craig says I need to be there as the pregnant daughter. For the optics. I smiled for the first time in 16 days. Not from joy, from recognition. The same feeling a surgeon gets when the imaging finally reveals the full extent of the tumor, when you can see every margin, every tentacle, every point of attachment. Complete visualization. Tell them yes, I said. Tell Ryan to call me tomorrow and ask. I'll agree. Dad, are you sure? Natalie, they're walking into my operating room. And this time, I choose when to cut. Day 8. January 17th. 8:47 a.m. I stood in my kitchen and drank black coffee from Helen's favorite mug, the white porcelain one with the chipped handle, that she'd refused to throw away because she said imperfect things carried more history than perfect. Honest. Outside, the Blue Ridge Mountains were sharp against a cloudless January sky. Temperature, 26 degrees. No wind. The kind of morning that made the world feel like it was holding its breath. My phone buzzed at 8:52 a.m. Ryan. Walt. It's Ryan. Listen. I know things have been Difficult. Natalie misses you. She's been crying every night. We just want to come by and grab a few of her things. Clothes, her prenatal records, some of the baby supplies from the guest room. That's all. Can we come this morning? Around 10, his voice was warm, concerned. The same voice he had used the first time I met him, when he'd shaken my hand at Natalie's apartment in Charlotte and said, "Dr. Brennan, it's an honor. Natalie talks about you like you're a superhero. 18 months ago. A lifetime." "That's fine, Ryan," I said. 10 o'clock. Use the front door. I hung up and sent one text message to Kat Blackwell. They confirmed. 10 a.m. All four. Kat's response came in 11 seconds. All units notified. Cortez confirms go. Stay calm. Stay inside. Let them come to you. At 9:15 a.m. I walked through the house one final time. 6 cameras active. I couldn't see any of them, which meant neither would they. Leo had tested the feeds at 6:00 a.m. from the command vehicle at Calvary Baptist. Every angle sharp, every microphone calibrated. Agent Cortez and her tactical team were positioned in 3 vehicles along Elk Mountain Road. Officer Tanya Brooks and 2 Asheville PD units waited at the Texaco station on Merrimon Avenue, 4 minutes away. Agent Ruiz Natalie's extraction sat in an unmarked sedan in the motel parking lot, ready to move the moment Cortez gave the signal. I sat down in my study at 9:40 a.m. On the desk in front of me, I placed 4 items. The 52-page Brennan Medical Estate Plan, the forged life insurance modification showing the beneficiary change to Ryan James Mercer, the printed email chain discussing the brake line contingency, and Helen's stethoscope, coiled beside them like a sleeping snake. 4 instruments. Laid out. Ready. They arrived at 10:03 a.m. I heard the car before I saw it, the 1977 Ford Bronco that had been Helen's, the one I'd given Ryan on New Year's Eve, pulling into my driveway with a transmission rattle that Helen would have hated. 4 doors opened. 4 doors closed. Footsteps on gravel. Then the front porch. Then the doorbell. I opened the door. Ryan stood in front, wearing a gray peacoat and an expression of rehearsed remorse. Behind him, Craig, tall, silver-haired, jaw, set like a man walking into a negotiation he expected to win. Diane to his left, clutching her purse with both hands, eyes scanning the foyer the way she'd probably scanned 100 foyers in 100 houses belonging to 100 marks across a dozen states. And behind all of them, Natalie. 7 months pregnant, wearing the blue maternity coat I'd bought her in October. Her eyes met mine for exactly 1 second. In that second, I saw everything. Fear, resolve, trust. "Come in," I said. They filed into the living room. Craig immediately looked toward the hallway leading to the study. Diane's eyes swept the bookshelves, the mantel, the windows. Professional assessment, cataloging exits and assets simultaneously. Ryan sat on the couch and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, the posture of a man performing earnestness. "Walt, I want to start by saying I'm sorry about New Year's Eve," Ryan began. "I was out of line. The stress of the pregnancy, the holidays. It's no excuse, but I want you to know." "Stop." The word landed like a scalpel on steel. Ryan's mouth stayed open for a half-second before closing. Craig straightened. Diane's hands tightened on her purse. I reached behind me and picked up the 52-page document from the study desk. I held it up so they could see the cover page, the one Natalie had glimpsed 3 weeks ago in Craig's briefcase. The one with my name, my address, and $7.2 million circled in red ink. "Brennan Medical Estate Plan," I read aloud. Authored by Craig Mercer, also known as Alan Novak, also known as David Pratt, also known as Richard Simmons. 52 pages. 7 phases. Target: Dr. Walter James Brennan. Estimated asset value: $7.2 million. The room went silent. Not quiet silent. The kind of silence I'd heard only once before in my career, in an operating room at Johns Hopkins, when a chief resident accidentally nicked the left anterior descending artery and everyone froze for 2 full seconds before training took over. Craig moved first. He stepped forward, his hand reaching inside his coat pocket. I saw the flash of metal. A folding knife. 3-inch blade. The kind you'd buy at a hardware store for $12. "Sit down, Craig," I said. "Or Alan. Or David. Or Richard. Whichever name you'd like on the federal indictment. You don't know what you're—" The front door opened. Officer Tanya Brooks entered first, weapon drawn, followed by Officer Marcus Reeves and 2 additional Asheville PD officers. Through the kitchen window, I saw 2 black SUVs pulling into the driveway. FBI. Craig Mercer, also known as Alan Novak, Brooks announced. "You are under arrest. Federal warrant. Hands where I can see them." Craig lunged toward the back door. He made it 4 steps before Reeves caught him and pressed him against the kitchen island, the same island where Helen and I had rolled pasta dough on Sunday mornings for 23 years. Diane dropped her purse and raised her hands. Ryan didn't move. He sat on the couch, staring at the 52 pages in my hand, and the color drained from his face, the way blood drains from tissue when you clamp the supply line. In the doorway, Natalie pressed both hands against her belly and whispered, "It's okay, baby. It's over." Helen's stethoscope sat on the desk behind me. I could almost hear her voice in it. "Good work, Walt." Clean incision. By 10:47 a.m., my living room had become an evidence processing zone. 2 FBI forensic technicians in blue latex gloves moved through the house, photographing every surface, bagging every item Leo's cameras had captured the Mercers touching. Yellow evidence markers dotted the floor like surgical flags on a chest cavity, each one marking a point of contact, a fingerprint, a fiber, a moment of proof. Craig Mercer sat handcuffed in the back of a federal SUV in my driveway, his silver hair pressed against the headrest, his jaw locked in the rigid silence of a man calculating how many of his aliases had just become useless. Diane occupied the second SUV, separated from her husband by 12 feet of gravel and 30 years of accumulated fraud. She had not spoken a single word since the handcuffs clicked. Not one. Ryan was different. Officer Brooks and Agent Cortez escorted him to a separate vehicle, an unmarked gray sedan parked on the street. Through the living room window, I watched him walk between them, his peacoat collar turned up, his hands cuffed in front rather than behind, because he had offered no resistance. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, architecturally. The scaffolding of confidence and charm that had held him upright for 18 months had collapsed, and what remained was a 34-year-old man whose entire professional skill set deception had just been rendered obsolete. Agent Cortez returned to the house at 11:15 a.m. She found me in the study, sitting behind my desk, Helen's stethoscope still coiled where I'd left it. She closed the door and sat in the leather chair across from me, the one Helen used to read in during winter afternoons. "I want to walk you through what happens next," she said. "Tell me everything." Ryan Mercer has requested to speak. No lawyer present. He waived his Miranda rights in the vehicle. That's unusual in my experience. It means one of 2 things. Either he believes he can talk his way out, which would be consistent with his psychological profile, or he's preparing to cooperate against Craig and Diane in exchange for a reduced sentence. Which do you think it is? Both. Simultaneously. He'll try to charm first, then pivot to cooperation when charm fails. I've interrogated 37 individuals with similar profiles. The pattern is remarkably consistent. She opened her portfolio. Here's the federal case as it stands this morning. Count 1. Wire fraud. The offshore transfers to Belize and Panama, totaling $358,000. Count 2. Insurance fraud. The $560,000 Atlantic Mutual claim for the surgical instruments. Count 3. Identity theft, use of your social security number, medical license, and forged power of attorney. Count 4. Conspiracy to distribute adulterated medical devices, 847 units, shipped to 5 clinics, 3 documented patient injuries. Count 5. Elder financial exploitation under North Carolina General Statute, 14 to 112.2. Count 6. Forgery the life insurance modification. Count 7. Conspiracy to commit murder. The recorded conversations regarding medication tampering and the Blue Ridge Parkway contingency. 7 counts. 7 layers of malignancy. In oncology, we call it staging, the process of determining how far a cancer has spread, how deep the roots have grown, how many systems have been compromised. Craig Mercer's operation was stage 4, metastatic. Every organ of my life infiltrated. The murder conspiracy charge carries the heaviest weight. Cortez continued. Federal sentencing guidelines for conspiracy to commit murder range from 15 to life. Combined with the fraud charges, Craig is looking at 20 to 25 years minimum. Diane, as a documented co-conspirator with direct involvement in the medication tampering, faces 12 to 18. Ryan's exposure depends entirely on what he gives us in the next 48 hours. And the storage unit? The motel? Executed simultaneously at 10:09 a.m. The Fletcher storage unit yielded the remaining surgical instruments. Your 1,923 Kirschner bone drill, 2 sets of ophthalmological probes, and the complete Civil War amputation field kit, all tagged and cataloged. The motel room produced Craig's briefcase containing the original 52-page plan, additional forged documents, $14,000 in cash, the tampered lisinopril capsules, and Diane's second phone with the pharmaceutical contacts. She paused. There's one additional finding from the motel. Inside Craig's briefcase, beneath a false bottom, agents recovered documentation from 7 prior operations. 7 families. 7 targets. Spanning 12 years and 9 states. The earliest dates to 2013, a retired dentist in Scottsdale, Arizona, named Harold Fenn. Asset value, $2.1 million. Outcome: Fenn died of apparent cardiac arrest in 2014. His estate was liquidated within 6 months. No criminal investigation was ever opened. I stared at her. 7 families. Harold Fenn had died, and no one had questioned it. A man with a name and a life, and presumably people who loved him. And Craig Mercer had walked away with $2.1 million and moved on to the next target. And the next, and the next. Until he reached Asheville, North Carolina, and knocked on my door wearing the mask of a concerned father-in-law. How many of the 7 are still alive? I asked. We're determining that now. At minimum, 3 show patterns consistent with the methodology used against you. Medical event staging, insurance manipulation, estate liquidation. The Bureau is opening cold case reviews in coordination with state authorities in Arizona, Florida, Virginia, Ohio, Texas, Oregon, and Connecticut. 7 families. 9 states. 12 years. I thought about the phrase Ryan had used at our first dinner. We're a close family. He'd been telling the truth. They were close. Bound together not by love but by a shared enterprise of systematic destruction. Moving across the country like a slow-moving infection, targeting isolated individuals with assets and trust, and no one watching closely enough to notice. Dr. Brennan, Cortez said, you should know without your daughter's cooperation, this case would have taken months to build, if we could have built it at all. The recordings she obtained, the photographs, the internal documents, they're the backbone of every count I just listed. Natalie is the reason this family's operation ends here. I looked at Helen's stethoscope on the desk. I thought about Natalie in the doorway of my living room, hands on her belly, whispering to her unborn child that it was over. Where is she now? I asked. Mission Hospital. Agent Ruiz transported her at 10:11 a.m. Prenatal evaluation in progress. She's asking for you. I stood up. I picked up the stethoscope and put it in my coat pocket. Then that's where I'm going. I never made it to the hospital. Not immediately. Because at 12:17 p.m., as I was pulling my Lincoln Navigator out of the driveway, Agent Cortez called. Dr. Brennan, Ryan is talking, and he's asking for you. I'm not a federal agent. Diana, no. But he's not talking to us. He's been in the interview room for 40 minutes, and he hasn't given us a single actionable statement. He keeps saying he'll only explain everything if you're in the room. Face to face. I sat in the Navigator with the engine idling, Helen's stethoscope pressing against my chest through the coat pocket. The rational decision was to drive to the hospital, hold my daughter's hand, and let the FBI handle Ryan Mercer the way they'd handled hundreds of suspects before him. But rationality had stopped governing this situation on New Year's Eve. Where? I asked. Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. Interview room 2. I'll meet you at the entrance. The interview room was exactly what you'd expect. Cinder block walls painted institutional gray, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs on one side, one on the other, a camera mounted in the upper corner with a red LED that pulsed like a heartbeat monitor. The fluorescent light overhead hummed at a frequency that reminded me of the backup generators at Johns Hopkins, that low, persistent vibration that became invisible after the first hour, but never actually stopped. Ryan sat in the single chair. His pea coat had been removed. He wore a white dress shirt, wrinkled at the elbows, the top button undone. His wrists rested on the table, no longer cuffed. A calculated decision by Cortez removing the handcuffs to create a false sense of conversational equality. I recognized the technique. Surgeons use a version of it. You lower the surgical drape so the patient can see your face during a local procedure. Eye contact creates trust. Trust creates compliance. Cortez sat to my left. A digital recorder occupied the center of the table. She pressed record and stated the date, time 1:08 p.m. location, and the names of all parties present. Dr. Brennan is here at your request, Mr. Mercer, Cortez said. You have been read your rights. You have waived your right to counsel. This interview is being recorded. Do you understand? Yes. Ryan looked at me. His eyes were red but dry, not from crying, from sleeplessness. The skin beneath his lower lids had the grayish tint I'd seen on patients in the early stages of systemic shock. Not medical shock. Existential shock. The kind that arrives when the architecture of your life collapses and you realize there is no version of tomorrow that resembles today. I want you to know, Ryan said, that I loved your daughter. You used my daughter. Both can be true. No, Ryan. They can't. Love doesn't author a 52-page plan to steal a man's estate and stage his death on a mountain road. Love doesn't forge insurance documents. Love doesn't practice crying on a 911 call while the person you're pretending to grieve is still alive. He flinched. The 911 rehearsal. He hadn't known we had that recording. Natalie recorded you, I said. 4 takes. You got better with each one. The sobbing in the 3rd take was particularly convincing. You even added a pause before saying, father-in-law. A nice touch. Very authentic. Ryan closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had shifted. The charm architecture was gone. What remained was not remorse, not yet. Maybe not ever, but a kind of exhaustion that I recognized from terminal diagnoses. The moment when the patient stops negotiating with the disease and begins negotiating with time. Craig found me when I was 22, Ryan said. I was in Reno. $87,000 in debt. Sports betting. I couldn't stop. He paid it off in a single wire transfer and told me I'd work for him until he decided I was done. That was 12 years ago. You were his employee. I was his tool. He built me. New identity. New wardrobe. New vocabulary. He taught me how to read people, their insecurities, their loneliness, their need to be needed. He sent me into families the way you'd send a probe into a vein. Find the weakness. Map the system. Report back. Cortez leaned forward slightly. How many families, Ryan? 8. Counting this one. We recovered documentation for 7 prior operations. The 8th was incomplete. A retired professor in Burlington, Vermont. We were 6 months into the approach when his son got suspicious and hired a private investigator. Craig pulled us out overnight. No charges were ever filed. And the deaths? Cortez asked. Harold Fenn, in Scottsdale. Were there others? Ryan's jaw tightened. He looked at the table. 2, he said. Harold Fenn. And a woman in Daytona Beach. Margaret Solis. 2017. Same method. Medication tampering. She was 71, lived alone, no children. Craig said she was clean, no family to investigate. 2 deaths. 2 people erased by a family whose operational model treated human beings as balance sheets to be liquidated. Margaret Solis, 71, no children, described as clean the way a surgeon describes a margin free of cancerous cells. Except in Craig Mercer's vocabulary, clean meant no one would notice. No one would care. And Diane's role? Cortez pressed. Diane handles the pharmaceutical side. She was a licensed pharmacy technician in Ohio before Craig recruited her. She knows dosages, interactions, timing. The lisinopril compound, the one meant for Walt, she'd used it twice before. Fenn and Solis. Same formula. Same veterinary source. Same outcome. I sat motionless. My hands rested flat on the metal table, the way they rested on a patient's chest before I made the first incision, still. Grounded. Connected to the surface, where the work would happen. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Ryan looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen on his face in 18 months of knowing him. Bare. Unperformed. Because you're the first one who fought back, he said. Every other family they trusted. They didn't question. They signed what Craig put in front of them and didn't look up until it was too late. But you, the night I hit you with that bottle, you didn't scream. You didn't beg. You wiped the blood off your face and sent 3 text messages. I knew right then. I knew we'd picked the wrong surgeon. Cortez stopped the recorder at 1:43 p.m. 35 minutes. Enough testimony to bury Craig and Diane Mercer for the rest of their natural lives. I stood up, buttoned my coat, and looked at Ryan one last time. You didn't pick the wrong surgeon, Ryan. You picked the only one who knew exactly where to cut. I arrived at Mission Hospital at 2:31 p.m. The same emergency entrance I had walked through 17 days earlier, with blood running down my face and glass fragments embedded in my scalp. This time, the blood was someone else's metaphorically. This time, I was the surgeon who had completed the operation, not the patient on the table. Agent Ruiz met me at the entrance. She was compact, mid-30s, with the kind of professional calm that told me she had done extractions before women, children, people removed from dangerous situations with the same clinical efficiency that I remove tumors from chest cavities. She led me through a side corridor to the maternity wing, 3rd floor, room 317. Natalie was sitting upright in bed when I walked in. A fetal heart monitor was strapped across her belly, the steady rhythm filling the room with a sound I had heard thousands of times in my career, but never like this. Not like this. This was my grandchild's heartbeat. 142 beats per minute. Strong. Consistent. Alive. She looked at me and her face collapsed. Not dramatically. Not the way Ryan had rehearsed grief on that motel recording. This was real. The kind of collapse that begins at the corners of the mouth and moves inward, pulling everything with it, until the entire architecture of composure gives way, and what's left is just a person. Unguarded, reaching, Dad. I crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed and held my daughter. She pressed her face against my shoulder and cried deep, silent, trembling sobs that I felt more than heard. I put one hand on the back of her head and the other on her belly, and for a long moment I held both of them, my daughter and my grandchild. The two patients I had been operating to save since New Year's Eve. Dr. Emily Sato, not the cardiologist Ryan had fraudulently scheduled, but an obstetrician on the maternity ward, entered at 3 p.m. She was calm, thorough, and direct. "Baby is healthy," she said. "Heart rate excellent. Amniotic fluid levels normal. No signs of distress. Your daughter's blood pressure is elevated 148/93, which is expected given the circumstances. I'd like to keep her overnight for monitoring. We'll reassess in the morning." "Thank you," I said. Natalie held my hand while Dr. Sato reviewed the chart. When the doctor left, the room was quiet, except for the fetal monitor, that steady, rhythmic pulse that sounded like a promise. "I need to tell you everything," Natalie said. "You don't have to." "Not today." "Yes, I do. Because if I don't say it now, I'll find a way to rationalize it later. And I don't want to do that. Not anymore." She told me. All of it. How Ryan had appeared in her life. At a conference in Charlotte. Charming, attentive, impossibly attuned to every insecurity she carried about being the daughter of a man whose career had always been larger than the family it was supposed to serve. How he had listened to her talk about me with a patience that felt like understanding, but was actually reconnaissance. How Craig and Diane had arrived 3 months after the wedding, presenting themselves as warm, generous in-laws who wanted nothing more than to help the young couple build a life. How the questions had started gradually about the house, the investments, my medical license, Helen's estate, each one wrapped in the language of concern. "We just want to make sure your father is protected. We just want to help him plan for the future." I believed them, Natalie said. For months, I believed them. And when the doubts started, Ryan always had an answer. Always. He could explain anything. He could make any lie feel like truth. And I was pregnant and scared, and I wanted so badly for it to be real that I chose not to look. "When did you stop choosing?" "The briefcase. 3 weeks before New Year's. When I saw the cover page with your name and the $7.2 million circled in red, I knew. In that moment, I knew everything I had been refusing to know, and I hated myself for it." "Natalie, you called me back. You answered my email. You carried a burner phone for 8 days and recorded conversations that will put 3 people in federal prison. You did that at 7 months pregnant, living inside the same room with them, sleeping next to a man who was planning to kill your father. Do not tell me you failed." She squeezed my hand. The fetal monitor beeped steadily, 142, 141, 143, a rhythm as constant as the metronome Helen used to keep on the piano when she taught Natalie to play Chopin as a child. The weeks that followed moved with the strange, compressed velocity of post-operative recovery each day, bringing small improvements that felt enormous against the backdrop of what had been. Kat Blackwell filed the formal federal case on January 22nd. Agent Cortez presented evidence to a grand jury in Charlotte on February 3rd. Indictments were returned on February 7th, 14 counts across 3 defendants. Ryan Mercer's cooperation agreement was finalized on February 14th. Valentine's Day. A coincidence that Kat noted with the driest smile I had ever seen on a lawyer's face. Natalie moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on Haywood Road on February 1st. I paid 6 months' rent in advance and furnished the nursery myself a crib, a changing table, a rocking chair that reminded me of the one Helen had used when Natalie was an infant. I hung the Provence watercolor above the crib. Helen would have wanted it there. Natalie began therapy on February 10th. Dr. Rebecca Torres, the same physician who had reported Martha Coleman's fractured stent, referred her to a trauma specialist in Asheville named Dr. Karen Liu. Twice a week. Tuesdays and Fridays. Natalie never missed a session. The trial was set for April 15th. Judge Robert Whitfield presiding. Federal Courthouse. Asheville Division. I visited Natalie every evening. I brought dinner, roasted chicken, sweet potatoes, the lemon vinaigrette salad Helen used to make every Sunday. I sat in the rocking chair while Natalie lay on the couch with her feet elevated, and we talked. Sometimes about the case, sometimes about the baby, sometimes about Helen memories that had been locked away during the 14 months of Ryan's occupation, now surfacing like air bubbles released from a deep wound, finally allowed to close. On March 28th, Natalie looked at me from the couch and said, "I want to name him after you. You don't know it's a boy. Dr. Sato confirmed it yesterday. It's a boy. And his name is Walter James Brennan II. I didn't respond. I sat in the rocking chair and held Helen's stethoscope in my lap and looked at my daughter's face and felt something I hadn't felt since the night Helen died. Complete. The trial lasted 4 days. April 15th through the 18th of April, 2025. Federal Courthouse, Asheville Division. Judge Robert Whitfield, presiding. I wore a charcoal suit on the first day, the same one I had worn to Helen's funeral. Kat Blackwell had told me not to. She said it would look too severe, that the jury would respond better to something softer. I wore it anyway. Helen had picked it out at a shop on Lexington Avenue 3 months before the diagnosis, running her fingers along the lapel and saying, "This is the suit of a man who doesn't bluff." She was right. I have never bluffed. Not in the operating room. Not in the courtroom. The prosecution's case was architectural. Agent Cortez presented evidence in the same sequence Leo and Kat had built it. Financial records, surveillance footage, forged documents, audio recordings, the 52-page plan, and the tampered lisinopril capsules recovered from the motel. Each exhibit entered the record like a suture, closing an incision precise, sequential, irreversible. Ryan Mercer testified on April 16th. He sat in the witness box for 4 hours and 17 minutes. He described the recruitment process, the operational methodology, the 8 families, the 2 deaths. He identified Craig as the architect and Diane as the pharmaceutical specialist. He spoke with the flat, measured cadence of a man reading his own autopsy report. When the defense attorney, a court-appointed lawyer from Charlotte named Kevin Holt, cross-examined him, Ryan did not waver. He had nothing left to protect. Natalie did not testify. Kat and Cortez had agreed that her recorded evidence, the photographs, the audio files, the burner phone logs, was sufficient. Putting a woman 8 months pregnant on the stand to describe how her husband and in-laws had planned to murder her father was, in Kat's words, legally unnecessary and humanly unconscionable. Craig Mercer's defense was silence. He did not testify. He did not make a statement. Kevin Holt offered a plea for diminished capacity, claiming Craig suffered from a compulsive behavioral disorder that impaired his judgment. Judge Whitfield listened with the patience of a man who had heard every variation of that argument across 31 years on the bench, then denied the motion in a single sentence. The court finds no credible evidence of diminished capacity. The defendant's actions reflect sustained, deliberate, and organized criminal conduct over a period of 12 years. Diane testified briefly on April 17th. She attempted to portray herself as a victim of Craig's control, a woman coerced into participation through financial dependence and psychological manipulation. Under cross-examination by the federal prosecutor, she was asked to explain the veterinary pharmaceutical contact in Knoxville, the precise dosage calculations in her handwriting, and the fact that she had personally administered the same compound to 2 prior victims. She had no explanation. Her testimony lasted 41 minutes. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Sentencing. The 18th of April, 2025. 10 a.m. Craig Mercer, also known as Alan Novak, David Pratt, and Richard Simmons, was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for the first 15. Ordered to pay $1.4 million in restitution to the families of Harold Fenn and Margaret Solis, and $700,000 to Walter James Brennan. Diane Mercer was sentenced to 12 years. Ordered to pay $400,000 in restitution, with an additional referral to the FDA for criminal prosecution related to the adulterated medical devices. Ryan Mercer, in exchange for his cooperation and testimony, was sentenced to 7 years. 3 years supervised probation upon release. Ordered to pay $560,000 in restitution, the full value of the fraudulent insurance claim. He was also permanently barred from contact with Natalie Brennan or any member of the Brennan family. When Judge Whitfield read Ryan's sentence, I watched my former son-in-law close his eyes. Not in relief, not in despair. In something closer to acceptance, the look I had seen on patients waking from bypass surgery, realizing they were alive but understanding that the life waiting for them would never resemble the one they'd had before. Walter James Brennan II was born on the 27th of April, 2025, 3:17 a.m. 7 pounds, 11 ounces, 21 inches long. Mission Hospital. The same building where I had received 8 stitches on New Year's Eve. The same building where I had held my daughter, while a fetal monitor marked the rhythm of a life that hadn't yet begun. I was in the delivery room. Natalie had asked me to be there, and Dr. Sato had approved it. I stood beside my daughter's bed and held her hand through 12 hours of labor. And when the baby arrived, red-faced, screaming, furious at the indignity of being born, I cut the umbilical cord myself. My hands did not shake. They never shake. The nurse placed him on Natalie's chest. She looked down at his face, then up at mine, and said nothing. She didn't need to. Some moments are complete without language. They exist in the space between heartbeats, that fraction of a second when the ventricle has emptied and the next contraction hasn't yet begun. Pure stillness. Pure potential. I took Helen's stethoscope from my coat pocket. I placed the chest piece gently against my grandson's back, and I listened. 158 beats per minute. Fast, strong, new, a heart with no history of betrayal. No memory of broken glass or forged signatures or 52-page plans authored in the language of destruction. A heart that knew nothing, yet nothing of the world that waited for it. Nothing of the family it had been born into. Nothing of the grandmother whose name it would carry in the middle initial. Nothing of the grandfather who had spent 45 years learning how to keep hearts beating and had finally found the one that mattered most. I leaned down and whispered into my grandson's ear so quietly that only he and I would ever know the words. Then I stood up, returned the stethoscope to my pocket, and looked out the hospital window. Dawn was breaking over the Blue Ridge Mountains. The dogwood trees along the parking lot had begun to bud small white flowers, pressing outward from branches that had been bare and frozen for months. Spring, the season when everything that survived the winter finally remembers how to grow. I am 70 years old. I have opened 10,000 chests. I have held hearts in my hands that belonged to strangers, and I have kept them beating. But this one, this small, furious, perfect heartbeat, this one I will hold forever.